Hello and welcome to the Jazz Jam Podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Gunnels, joined by my co-host, Max Levy. And on today's episode, we are going to be getting into a more modern album, but something that came out about 20 years ago now. The album is entitled Momentum by Joshua Redman Elastic Band, kind of a one-off group that got together for this album. It's got a kind of a wide range of different players on the album. And so, yeah, I'm super excited to get into this one. It's actually a listener recommendation. A good friend of mine, Paul, who I work with, he was listening to this and said that we should check it out. So definitely, I'd never heard it before he was playing it. So I'm excited to get into it. Max, what are you thinking about this album today?
I had never really heard of it myself, and it's got some similarities to some other albums we've reviewed, and it's sort of a snapshot in the career trajectory of Joshua Redman that is maybe overlooked or not as noticed by a lot of jazz listeners or, fans of jazz music. So I think we're going to get into some neat stuff. And it was really interesting going in and digging into this album because it's got some things I really, really dig and some things I really, really don't. And it's sort of this weird mishmash hodgepodge, musically speaking, that I think will be really interesting to explore as we get into it.
Yeah, and there's lots of different things going on this album and lots of different players, as we said. We get features from Questlove on the drums and Brian Blade, Flea on the bass from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So definitely a unique album.
Yeah, really unique. That's the right word.
So, but before we get into the album, we haven't done any kind of listener question, which if you do have a question, please submit it. We haven't done any kind of listener question or game or anything in a while. We've just been kind of getting straight into the episodes. So today, I want to hit Max with a game. He has no idea what's coming. I just thought of this a couple minutes ago. So the game today is I've got a playlist, and the playlist is entitled Saxophone Classics. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on a song, and I'm going to try to get to like the saxophone solo, and we're going to see if Max can name the saxophone player that's playing on the song. Yeah, this is usually I say this is either going to make Max look really good or really bad, and usually kills it. So we'll see what happens today. We're going a little tougher on this one today. We're going to try to hit Max with a couple different saxophone players and see if he can tell who they are just by their playing. Max, are you ready for this?
You really like to keep me on my toes. I'm as ready as I could ever be. So
I think that's what the people would want, is for us to keep you on your toes. So all right, let's get going with the first one, Max.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to get to the solo, but we might have to do a little scrubbing back and forth to try to find it. Here we go.
Oh, I got it.
Okay, go as soon as you got it.
That's Ben Webster.
All right, 1 for 1. That was easy.
Ben Webster,
okay.
one of my first favorites. Yeah.
All right, let's switch it up a little bit. We're gonna go here. Try to get to the solo.
Dexter Gordon?
Oh, no. Close. I'll rewind a little bit.
Right. But hold on. Definitely heard it.
All right, I'll give you one more guess.
Just give me a letter. First letter.
H.
H of the first name
Of the
or
first name,
last name?
yeah.
Shoot. Why is it not coming to me?
Blue Note guy. We've done him on the podcast.
Hank Mobley?
It is Hank Mobley.
Okay.
But
yeah, but for some,
that
didn't he
ballad sound is
sound like
very
Dexter?
Dexter. Yeah, it like
Yeah.
very soothing, like very soulful. That was if you had played that for me, and I love Hank, and we both listen to a lot of Hank, I would have guessed Dexter before I guessed Hank.
Yeah, exactly. He sounded a lot like Dexter's tone. Although when you said Hank, or when I eventually guessed it, I could see it now.
Yeah.
But his sound just seemed bigger than Hank's sound normally does.
Yeah, yeah. And the name of the tune is The Good Life off of the album The Turnaround.
Yeah, I could tell that I remembered or I recognized the tune, The Good Life. It's usually played a little bit faster, but I like that tempo for it.
Yeah, let's get into the next one. This is fun. Let's do a couple more here.
Okay.
Try to get to the solo, which can be hard to do. Oh, here we go.
Hannibal?
No.
Jackie McLean.
Nope. More modern.
Kenny Garrett?
Yes.
Yeah, Kenny
Yeah.
Garrett.
That was a tough one. I'd never heard
Well,
that
he
song.
started off doing more language, and that's why I thought Cannonball. And then it was like, okay, that's a bigger sound, or it's that
A little more
edgier thing.
edgier out there, kind of all around sound.
Yeah.
Not
And that's
as buttoned up as Cannonball.
right. and
Jackie
that's
McLean,
Kenny
that was
Garrett.
a fun progression when you went from Cannonball to then Jackie, who was like a little bit edgier but still super
Right.
pop. And then you're like, I said more modern. You're like, okay, this is definitely Kenny Garrett. That was funny.
You could see the wheels spinning in my head.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, all right, you're progressing. That's
Right.
funny. All right, let's do another one. Hold on. Let me cue something up. This is a good one.
Oh, Sonny Stitt.
Yeah, let's go. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah.
It's funny how you can hear one thing. I'll hear that sometimes. I'll be hearing I'll just put on a playlist and you'll hear a player play and they do one thing and you're like, that is a Sonny Stitt thing. I hear it with Kenny Garrett a
Yeah.
lot too. And I'm like, that's got to be Kenny Garrett because that's a Kenny Garrett thing, Dexter a lot of times too.
Well, Sonny Stitt's tone on tenor is a little similar to a lot of other players, but when you start to really get into a solo, there are those Stitt-isms, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, that's Stitt.
Yeah, his tone isn't like specifically unique. There are other guys that have a similar kind of tone and play a lot of bop licks, but then you get some of those Stitt-isms, as you said. All right, let's do a couple more. I'm gonna try to hit you with maybe a difficult one, and then I'll hit you with we'll just switch it up a little bit. Let's see.
Yeah, because these have been so easy.
No, I mean you've handled it pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah, I only really missed one so far. So let's try some more.
Okay, here we go. Oh, give me 2 seconds. I'm trying to find a good one. You might get this easily too, but we're gonna do it.
Oh, Eddie Lockjaw Davis.
Oh my God, he's too good.
Eddie Lockjaw Davis, one of the most swinging cats you'll ever hear.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get you with one. Let's
And you can tell from his articulation, it's like a little staccato-y along his phrases.
yeah.
And his tone is like tubbier and darker. It's kind of like almost the Coleman Hawkins thing.
Yeah.
But Lockjaw brings his own tenacity to it. I love Lockjaw Davis. So, hit me with another.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna try to get you with one. Give me Here we go. You might just get this one too easily. Max is too good at this. All right. Give me 2 seconds. Let me get into the saxophone solo.
Ooh. Pharaoh Sanders?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do one more. Damn, it was so Pharaoh Sanders. I was like, maybe it's gonna be out there enough, but it was so Pharaoh Sanders.
Pharaoh's great because he brings that like screaming saxophone thing, but it's also in the pocket. And so later on when you were playing his solo, I was like, it's too in the pocket to be, you know, Albert Eiler or somebody else. It's like that's Pharaoh Sanders.
Yeah, it's so fair. That was a cool recording. That was called "You've Got to Have Freedom" by Pharaoh Sanders.
Amen.
Okay, all right, we're gonna do one final one. We're gonna see if I can stump Max. I think he's gonna get this one easily too. But we're gonna give Max one more. He's killed it as we could have guessed. Let's give him one more and see what he's got.
All right, I'm ready. Oh, Stanley Turrentine.
All right.
Stanley Turrentine.
I that was the melody. Apparently, I didn't go far enough in, but yeah,
I was right.
Yeah,
right?
You were right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, try me again, buddy.
All right, I got one more. This is the last one. Then, if you get this one, you win. Okay.
Okay.
I don't even know who this is.
Interesting.
You want me to go back a little bit?
Maybe.
I think he might be semi-modern. I don't know who this guy is. I think I've seen the name.
George Adams?
No. I'll give you the initials. SR.
The tone sounds really familiar.
All right, you want me to tell you? Let me tell you the other musicians on the recording and the name of the album. The name of the album is called Fuchsia Swing Song. The other musicians are Jackie Bird, Ron Carter, and Anthony Williams.
Wow. SR. So no. SR.
Sonny Rollins is like the most obvious SR that comes to mind, but it's obviously not Sonny.
It's not Sonny Rollins. What's the second letter of the last name?
I.
Oh. Third letter of the last name?
V.
Oh, Sam Rivers.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense now. I don't listen to a lot of Sam Rivers, but that is Sam Rivers. Yeah. You're right. He's a little more modern. There's a great tune people call at jam sessions that's a Sam Rivers tune. And it's the name of it is escaping me. But it's a very popular sort of jam session tune. Beatrice, that's the name of the tune. Beatrice by Sam Rivers is pretty popular at some jam sessions.
That's a song we
And
were
it
just listening to.
was that Beatrice?
That's
Okay.
Beatrice. Yep.
Yep. That was Sam Rivers on Beatrice, which I should have known. But I haven't listened to Sam Rivers in probably 3 or 4 years. So
Yeah, I his name didn't. I mean, I think I've seen his name, but it wasn't someone I was familiar with. Everyone else on the list was like Ornette Coleman, Charlie Parker, Coltrane. So I was like, let's give him something that's actually maybe gonna stump him.
right.
But that
Yeah,
sounded
you made me
cool.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's
He's
definitely
great.
his most listened to song on Spotify. But all right, well that was fun. Let us know if you guys like that kind of thing, us doing fun games and putting Max on the spot and trying to make him look bad, even though he always ends up looking good. So let's get into the album, Max. Why don't you tell us a little bit? There's not a crazy amount of history given it's a more recent album, but tell us about the history and the personnel on this album, Max.
Yeah, this album, Momentum from Joshua Redman Elastic Band, is a 2005 studio album on None Such Records, the record label Joshua Redman was with for a very long time through Warner Brothers. It's made up of mostly originals, aside from an Ornette Coleman tune called Lonely Woman, a Sheryl Crow song called River Wide, and Led Zeppelin's The Crunch. And a couple of the tunes are credited to the keyboardist on the album, Sam Yael or Yael. I believe that's a Hebrew or Jewish name. This was nominated for Best Contemporary Jazz Album for the 48th Grammys, and it's gotten a mix of reviews. There's some reviews out there that you'll find that really do enjoy this album. They like that it brings other musical elements into jazz and it mixes some stuff together. And then you got some reviews that really dislike it, especially one you'll find on Pop Matters. And if you want to spend some, a good 3 or 4 minutes entertaining yourself, read the Pop Matters review of this album, Momentum. And he goes in a little harsh and a little too harsh for my liking, but it's interesting to check out the mixed reviews that this album got. The personnel is, of course, Joshua Redman on tenor sax. He also does some keyboards. He's the album's producer. And Sam Yael plays keyboards. He's also the co producer of the album. And we get a number of great guests that are involved in this album, including Nicholas Payton on trumpet on the 12th track. We also get Stefan Harris on vibraphone on a couple of the tunes. And then an array of guitarists. We get Peter Bernstein, Eric Krasno, Jeff Parker, and Kurt Rosenwinkel on one of the tracks. Bass player Flea is on 3 of the tunes, and we get a funky bass from Michelle Indigiacello on track number 7. We also use mainly 2 different drummers, Jeff Ballard and the great Brian Blade, and then there's one song with Questlove that you mentioned earlier. So he's kind of using a cast of characters that I think he thinks would work really well with the goal and the direction, the musical direction that this album is taking. And I think he's sort of experimenting. This is like a moment in experimentation in Joshua Redman's career. From my perspective, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And he does a good job of bringing in musicians that would fill these roles well and bring in some different, Questlove, very hip hop, the Jay Dilla kind of playing in his playing, and then you get Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. As we know, Flea grew up listening to jazz music and very funky kind of slap bass style. So yeah, I think he's just experimenting with how he can mix these guys into a more jazz setting and see what kind of sound he gets from it.
That's right. And they do get some interesting things going on, including the mixture of sort of short interlude like songs or almost songs mixed with, the meat and potatoes, the funkier tunes. So we start off with one of those short interludes. It's sort of like just the beginning of the album that makes a little bit of a statement right away.
Yeah, and that first track is entitled Soundcheck, so it's kind of telling us like, hey, we're getting into the gig and we're just checking the sound, like doing a sound check. and it starts out with an electronic rhythmic beat. It sounds like a sequencer of some sort, which I'm assuming it probably is, or a rhythm, like a drum beat, like a beat machine. And then a drum set follows in behind it. And then we get Redman coming in with sounds like just sort of like noodling, and there's a good amount of echo and delay on his sax. And then we get a groove bass line that comes in that's just really hammering on the root, but super funky. The drums open up a little bit more here, too, as the bass comes in. And then we get an octave pedal on the sax, which is going to happen throughout the album. Joshua Redman's really going to experiment with the octave, using an octave pedal to make his sax go, sound like multiple saxophone players are playing at the same time in different octaves. And that's a cool effect. And I want us to take a listen. There's a little snippet we can listen to and just kind of get an idea of all of these elements together: the bass, the drums, the rhythm drum machine, and the octave pedal. So let's listen here for that. Yeah, so the delay, the echo, that kind of octaver on the saxophone. Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool way to fun jam intro to the album. Max, what did you think about it?
It's an interesting way to start the record. I do like that we're trying to emulate a sound check, because if you're a musician, you know that what you do on a sound check isn't what you do on the gig sometimes. I mean, you want to test levels, you want to play through some licks, you want to make sure, you can hear everything in monitors, and maybe have an in-ear monitor you got to work out. You kind of work out the kinks, but it never really is how it sounds on sound during the sound check as it is on the gig. And this kind of like reminds you of that. And I dig that. I will say I'm not really into the whole pedal thing. It's interesting because a saxophone player I know messaged me yesterday wanting to sell me a couple of pedals, and because he's been experimenting with that, and he wanted to see if he could get rid of some stuff and make room for other things. And I just said no, because I think I've worked on my tone too much, and I have a particular sound in my mind. Doesn't mean I can't play multitude of different styles, because I can. But if I have a particular sound in mind and that I've worked so hard for, I don't want to damage it with the use of pedals. And that might be a little harsh, but in this style, it makes sense to use them. I just don't personally dig them that much.
Yeah, and I think you might be coming, you probably self-admittedly have a kind of maybe more old school way of thinking. I mean, we love to do a lot of swing and some older stuff, and the pedals are great with some of this more, and this is kind of what we get into on the album, the more experimental kind of fusion stuff and kind of manipulating the saxophone sound, which probably is, not what you're trying to go for,
That's right.
Yeah. So, but I think this track does a cool job of, like we were saying, you're saying like with the soundtrack, they're like experimenting with things and trying to get the sound right. And that sounds like what they're doing here. And we're going to get more of kind of these different effects and pedals on the album. So it really does kind of give us a taste of what we're going to be getting into on the album.
That's right. All right. And then we get the second track called Sweet Nasty, which is a Joshua Redman original. As the song continues, you can tell there's an obvious Eddie Harris influence on this one. The rhythm section opens up too, playing the rhythmic groove that plays underneath the melody. And then Joshua Redman comes in with the head. There's lots of bended notes in his melody. The bridge melody has legato or tenuto quarter notes played by the saxophone along with the guitar. That just means we're doing the full length of the quarter note. We're not shortening it by staccatos or stylizing it. We're playing a full beat worth of a sound. And that's kind of what legato or tenuto refers to, is the articulation of those quarter notes. There's also a nice call and response effect where the organ answers the tenor saxophone melody. And I want us to listen to that together because it's a neat arranging technique, and that comes across really well in terms of the development of the song.
I like how they kind of overlap the call and response. It's not like I play something and then you wait and play something. They're just kind of overlapping and almost like starting to talk over each other a little bit.
They're intertwined,
Yeah.
which makes the melody more interesting as it develops. Because the other thing that helps is say more, because they basically play the whole head two times through, and they'll do that again later on in this album. So that's one thing that Joshua Redman is getting at too, is that you don't always have to play the head just one time through. And a lot of vocalists sometimes, maybe if you're in a jazz band setting, and maybe you play the first chorus through with the saxophone playing the head, and then the vocals come in with the melody, or you do the melody twice through or one and a half times through, where the second time you add to it and you improvise a little bit and you play on top of the melody. So this is kind of alluding to that in its own way by playing the head two times through. And I think that's really neat and it's really cool. The first time it's predictably AABA in terms of the song form. And then the second time through that head, it's more like ABC with an outro line, and they repeat the opening hits, this time with the saxophone, before the saxophone solo starts around the 2:18-minute marker. So that's another interesting thing. With that sax solo, we get on point articulation. There's shorter phrasing, generally speaking, from Joshua. It works to leave some room for contributions from the bass and the drums. It's great to hear how drummer Jeff Ballard accompanies Redman's sax solo. Also to note, there's no electric organ accompaniment during the saxophone solo. Let's listen to a moment of thematic development towards the tail end of Redman's solo to get a feel for it.
Yeah, I love that it's just drums, bass, and sax during Redman's solo.
Yeah, it opens it up, and he can venture, more in terms of playing. There was a lot of repetition in that, but it developed. It's not like just repeating an idea over and over again. Yeah, so with that, we get also an electric organ solo. There's great chromatic lines behind the solo to listen for as well. Nice short phrases here too during the solo. Before Joshua Redman comes back in with that C part of the melody, they play towards the end of the second time through the head. They then play the hits from the beginning. It's a classic case of intro as outro movement or arrangement that actually keeps going, in this instance, into a drum solo. This is nicely done, and the drum solo was somewhat unexpected here. I didn't expect one, listening to how they arranged the melody, but it was a nice surprise. They then end with an A section and a short stab from the group. All in all, it's a solid track. Great composition, great arrangement. I'm very pleasantly intrigued with this tune, Sweet Nasty.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same sentiments. I love Josh's solo. I love the way that Josh plays the head, just so much soul and emotion. And yeah, the drum solo, I wasn't expecting it, but it's such a great addition. And I don't know what size snare Ballard's using, but it's such a nice, it's like super crisp, tight snare sound, which I think works really well on this funky tune here.
That's a good point. I didn't notice that myself, but you're right. Now thinking about it, it's very clear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. It does a lot to kind of really accentuate the funk groove that they've got going. Well, let's move into the third track on the album. And this time we get one of these kind of interludes that Max and I had mentioned previously. It's called Just a Moment. And this is definitely interesting, to say the least. My interpretation of this, or the way that it sounds to me, is it sounds like aliens are trying to abduct the drummer Brian Blade and the rhythm section, but they are just fending them off with the sounds of quote-unquote jazz. And in the end, the musicians win, and we end with a calm, held-out electric piano sound and no more aliens. This sounds crazy. I sound like I should be abducted by aliens, so I'm going to let y'all listen to this with me just to kind of see the imagery I'm getting at. It is definitely interesting. It's unique, and kind of the experimental aspect of the album that Max and I had kind of alluded to in the intro. Let's listen for it. Yeah, so that's how it starts. Just kind of the alien noises coming and Brian Blade fending him off with the drums.
It does sound like he's fighting with the alien or
Yeah,
something.
that's exactly what I'm getting. Like it's strange. And let's listen to the end where it kind of all comes to a head, and it seems like the musicians finally win the battle here. And yep, that's the rest of the track.
It does give a sense of calmingness, like after the battle.
The weirdness.
Weirdness. Conflict has resolved a little bit, and the jazz musicians have won the day.
Yeah. So that's what we're getting from that. It's not a long track, a minute and 20 seconds. That's pretty much all we're getting. Max, do you have anything more to add on to that one?
I've got absolutely nothing else to say.
All right, let's move right along into the fourth track, Max.
Please and thank you. All right, the fourth track, we get a tune called Shut Your Mouth, which that's a powerful statement.
I like it. We got a tune called Fed Up. It kind of goes right in line with that.
That's right. This is an original from the keyboardist, Sam Yael. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a fast 4/4 time feel. And you can kind of feel it as in halftime. So you can kind of think 1, 2, 3, 4. You can think 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of the speed of the quarter note, however you feel it. Starting at the 9-second mark, it sounds like the music to the start of a racing or skiing video game to me. Overall, it's a nice groove and melody. I love how the keyboard doubles the saxophone melody towards the end of the head. And I love those hits that are played together that indicate the end of the head and the start of the saxophone solo. And I want us to listen to that little 10 seconds together.
Yeah, I love that. The first time I listened to the song, that caught my attention for sure.
Yeah, another moment where you didn't expect it. Those hits, it's a great transition into the solo section. And the first note of Redman's solo is my kind of Joshua Redman. Okay. He's got some grease in him. It's great development in the solo here. There's more shorter phrases. He plays a number of ideas in the extremes of his register. He doesn't shy away from the altissimo end or the low end of the horn, and he plays with purpose and flair. He always gives that here, and we also get a moment of the lick, at least rhythmically speaking, if we want to listen to it.
Yeah, I think it's just a full-on demon. It's like the lick exactly. Let's listen to that. Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, just right there. It's so grooving too. He just fits it in nicely.
Oh yeah. I mean, all the great thing about the lick is how you get into it and how you get out of it.
Exactly.
Right?
Anyone can just play it.
Right. But you want to be musical with it and put it into your phrase in a way that, works really well. And he does it there.
Yeah, I agree.
Later on, it sounds like he's got a pedal or some other effect on the sax as he continues into the solo. Let's check out that effect a little bit and listen for the killer ending he does to close out his saxophone solo.
Yeah, that was wild.
Wasn't that neat?
Yeah, it almost sounds like there's multiple saxophones going in different directions. I don't know if he overdubs it or what's going on there.
It could be an overdub or it could be an effect on a pedal that does that. I don't know. Maybe it's both. You put the effect on you overdubbing yourself on it.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. It definitely sounded cool the way he kind of squealed that out and kind of felt like it was almost getting ripped apart.
That's right. The insides of Joshua Redman are just everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Those aliens
It's
got to him.
he lost that battle,
Yeah.
but he'll be back. In general, it seems like Redman got to stretch out a little bit on this one, and it's much appreciated. I mean, that's what I really dig about some of what Joshua Redman gives us is he's not afraid to dig in and explore and really play. He's a player's player in a lot of ways. So that's one example of that. We also get a drum groove that continues as a transition before a synth solo. The synth solo gradually grows in intensity, but obviously Sam is taking his time, and we're more simmering here than really going hard as one might on a solo feature.
Yeah, and I think this is a cool kind of experimental fusion feel that we get from Sam, and it kind of reminds me of the Herbie Hancock Headhunters era of fusion synthesizer. So yeah, it's a cool sound he's getting here.
Yeah, I think that's a definite influence from what they're giving us. And that synth continues us into a fade out. And oh no, it's the dreaded fade out that I despise so much. But I don't mind this one that much. I do wish maybe they went back into a melody or maybe a set of cool rhythmic hits to close it out. In general, maybe it took too much time on the saxophone stretching to incorporate that idea towards the end. So in that case, I will allow it.
Oh man, if Max allows it, it's not the worst thing ever. Yeah, I kind of had the same kind of thought. It works fine, nothing special with the fade out, but it works fine on this track. But let's get into the fifth track on the album entitled "The Crunge." This is a Led Zeppelin tune from the album Houses of Holy, and this song stemmed from a jam session of Led Zeppelin's album. And Josh and company does a great job of kind of bringing that same energy here, the jam session kind of feel. And it's a cool, short, and sweet funk tune. We get Flea on the bass, which seems appropriate, and he really does a great job of bringing the funk. And they end going out of the Josh solo into a tag that's played by Josh and then layered with more saxophone, assumingly done by Josh in post-production, as he's the only sax player credited on the album. So we get kind of more that layering saxophone kind of thing, experimental thing. It's a cool, fun, short interlude. I kind of wish it went on for longer. Max, what did you think about this track?
I wish Joshua Redman went on this, with a solo, an extended solo on this tune, The Crunch, because I agree. It's like it says so much, and then you're going to cut it to 2 minutes. The original Led Zeppelin track is, I think, only 3.5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So in my mind, at least do that. At
Yeah.
least do 3 minutes, especially in a jazz funk context. I mean, I could see Redman going off on this track, and he doesn't.
Yeah, it's weird, like times in this album where they choose to stretch things out and certain times where they choose to like limit things. And this is one of the times where it's like, I don't know why you choose to limit it here instead of stretching it out. And some of the other times when you're stretching out and not limiting it. So it's just a little confusing here, but it's a great, fun track. Just 2 minutes.
It is. And that ending where the saxophone layering occurs, where he's overdubbing, those horn hits, that directly reminds me of the James Brown horn section, where you got cats like Fred Wesley, Pee Wee Ellis, the great Maceo Parker, and they would play those rhythmic hits like that as a horn section. They went out on the road as their own unit, and of course, they played similar ideas behind James Brown, went on the road with him. And so that little ending of The Crunge directly reminds me of that type of playing or that style.
Yeah, I get that a lot. The kind of 70s straight ahead funk kind of feel there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like funk horn trio kind of thing. Yeah, for sure, Max.
Right. It's the Fred Wesley thing. I mean,
Yeah.
Pee Wee Ellis all day, Maceo all day. So I dig that. I just wish there was more sax solo on that. And then the sixth track, we get the tune River Wide, and we get a different feel here. It almost reminds me of the Yellow Jackets type of playing or something similar like a Snarky Puppy thing. We get keyboard pads, the great cymbals and guitar flickerings before Redman comes in on the sax. The melody begins rubato with growing organ harmony, sustaining us and sustaining the those harmonies on the organ to beef up the sound as the saxophone continues until there is a measure long break that leads us into defined time. Also, to note, this is a Sheryl Crow song. And that's different too. I wonder if he was just checking out some Sheryl Crow and he said, you know what? Let's do it.
Yeah, that's experimental in its own right, just doing this tune. I mean, it's not a jazz tune at all. It's a cool tune, but yeah, Sheryl Crow, how many jazz albums are going to feature a Sheryl Crow cover?
Yeah, hardly any.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a neat thing. And the way they play it is really interesting to listen to. It's really soulful. It's very nice at the 120-minute mark where they go into a defined groove. I want us to listen to see how they do that firsthand because it's really professional. It's really done very nicely.
Yeah. Such a nice groove too. Kind of like gospel-y in my opinion.
There's a gospel element there for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And there, the group is letting the guitar ride on top of the intro like vamp that serves as sort of a breather before the sax and guitar melody comes in at 157, right around the 2 minute mark. The head has great melodic construction. It's sort of an 8 bar phrase repeated 4 times, then a 4 bar phrase repeated 3 times. Then the tail end of the 8 bar idea is played before the groove continues to set up a saxophone solo. Joshua Redman takes his time. He's leaving adequate space in between his ideas. He's more soulful here, and he works to dig in a little bit more here, too. It's really, really appreciated. It's a nice, very soulful, feel good, down home palate cleanser. Let's listen for yourself to check that out.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention, I agree. He's free and soulful, and I really like the rhythm section, how they play with him, and listen for Brian Blade, the drummer. He's so nice to listen to during Josh's solo. Yeah. Yeah, and to bring it back into the melody there at the end, that's great development.
This is the Joshua Redman I love.
Yes.
And I don't, and what he's been doing lately is not this. And I have some feelings about it, but he's always a great artist no matter what he does. It's just this is a little refreshing, I think.
I completely agree, and that's like one thing I wanted to mention is like I wonder how differently we feel about this album now versus if we were reviewing it in 2005, like about kind of the experimental aspects, but also Josh's playing. This is definitely a more like forward, front and center groove and gospel bluesy sound that we're getting from Josh, whereas now he's kind of getting into this more modern and whimsical, lighter sound. Not that it's bad, it's just what a lot of modern cats are doing, but I agree with Max. Super refreshing to get Josh just kind of laying it all out there for us in this recording.
Yep. Yep. I also love the call and response fills that happen later on between the sax and guitar as Redman is ending his solo. The drum solo that occurs while rhythm section and saxophone play a riff tag idea every 4 bars is interesting to check out too. You can hear he's all over the kit. Great use of snare drum, great use of tom playing. All in all, a tremendous drum solo here. And then there's sort of the spacey echo on that final high note trill we get from Redman's horn. And I question why the sort of Star Trek echo. Here we are in space yet again with the aliens, and I don't know why that has to be there.
Yeah, it's just another kind of experimental thing. And maybe at the time it seemed cooler than now. Looking back, it might seem a little bit cliche or maybe a bit cheesy now, but that's 20 years ago. He was trying to be different.
But they're still doing it. What was that album? I think the Yellow Jackets album we reviewed did it on a tune or two. Maybe there's another newer album, modern album that does it. It's still sort of this practice that you'll see randomly occur. And I just question why. Why is this the thing?
Yeah, I guess people just trying to be different. Yeah, I don't know.
It's not different anymore.
That's true.
It's been going on for 20 years now.
That's a good point, Max.
I don't know, but I do feel relieved from that last sound when I hear the next track on the album, Greasy G. What'd you think about this one, Dwayne?
Yeah, this is just as the title tells us, this one's greasy. I mean, it's super funky groove here, and we get bassist Michelle Nadegiocello on this one. And her album, her 2023 album, The Omnichord Real Book, won the new jazz Grammy category in the Grammys Best Alternative Jazz Album just recently. So we've seen her pop into the spotlight. So we get Michelle on bass here, and this tune's super, super funky. I love the space in the melody that really lets the groove breathe, and then the groove focused electric piano solo first that transforms into a clav solo is really cool. We get some really funky licks from Sam when he hops onto the clav, and there's really great use of space and some different techniques here from Sam. So I want to listen. We haven't listened to a whole lot of what Sam's been doing thus far, but I think he really shines here. So I want us to listen to a bit of his solo here on Greasy G. Yeah, so just that super funky clav playing from Samuel.
That's so nice. How do you not dig that?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's so fun to listen to. And then we get a bridge that takes us out of the keys solo, and then the melody once before a drum solo that's played with the band playing band-wide hits. That become more frequent and intense through the drum solo, and this drives us into a hit at the end. And it's definitely a nice ending, and the grittiest funk tune that we've gotten on the album thus far. A really nice, refreshing track, and just fun to listen to, in my opinion.
Absolutely, we get fun, and I can't say no to fun.
Exactly.
Which brings me to the next track, Lonely Woman, which is a free jazz composition from the remarkable Ornette Coleman. I believe he's won Pulitzer Prizes and things like that for his music, one of the all-time greats in terms of free jazz. And they do their own version here from Redman and the gang. It's not exactly what Ornette Coleman maybe had in mind originally.
I would guess not.
Because yet again, we're experimenting with these sort of spaceship sounds, as I refer to them. And we start off the track right away with that spaceship sound as percussion enters randomly prior to some 2-hit bass grooves, and it layers in from there. I like the layering effect. It's just that immediate sort of spaceship entrance is off-putting to me, and that makes me not want to listen to the whole track, even though of course, I did, and we went into it. But anyway, the sonic foundation is sort of solidified eventually, and I want you to hear it for yourself. It's a little 20-second snippet of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's just like the drums and then the alien synth sounds are just so busy together. It almost gives me a headache. Like when I was listening to this, I was like, it's so clustered. Like so much is going on. Why do we need this sequencer and the drums at the same time? And I don't know. I feel like it would just sound better without those synth sequencers in the background. It's so crowded.
The song is called Lonely Woman, and she sounds anything but lonely.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing lonely about this track at all.
I thought it sounded like we got shrunk inside the Magic School Bus, and we're going through the insides of a computer.
That's a good one too. I can visualize that. I'm sure we all watched that show as a kid or in school, and that's a great analogy there as well, Max.
Into the Magic School Bus. Anyway, the melody eventually comes in as sort of a frantic drum groove occurs, and then we add in heavier bass, moments of heavy reverb, and delay saxophone effects. And then the second A melody comes back in sort of randomly. It's not like you could tell they waited 8 bars and then it came back. It just sort of happens. Maybe they cued it. I don't know. There is a really cool climax point at the end of the bridge or the B part of the head. Let's listen to that together.
And then the alien sounds are back.
That's right. Well, it's interesting because that climax point is in the middle of the melody, right? It's like the end of the bridge or the B section, and then they're going to come back in with the last A section of the head. So it's an interesting placement, and in terms of the arrangement, I really dig it. It's just sort of, again, that alien thing is getting in the way, I think. Yeah. And then later on, there's some free soloing that happens before the last A comes in. And then we get electronic free jazz galore with the use of pedals, more effects on the sax, and that deep Matrix movie sound effect that I'm not a big fan of, but it's an interesting use of what sounds kind of like a marimba. And let's check that out together.
Yeah, I'm glad you played that clip because I think that's a really cool. There's like kind of a lot of call and response going on, like kind of free jazz, kind of listening and calling and responding. I thought I had mentioned that too in my notes. I think that's a cool clip there, Max.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting moments of this track. And that continues until the end of the song, until the end of Lonely Woman with the percussive space-like sound ending it. I'm not sure how to take this version, generally speaking. Again, it's electronic music almost mixed with free jazz, with moments of funk and cool things like call and response. I just think it's sort of cacophony, and it's very confusing.
Yeah, I like my feeling about it is like the sequencers that are on it, like those quote unquote alien sounds that we're saying just to, have fun and give it some imagery. I just don't understand the point. And if you were to completely remove those, I think this is a good track. Like when I just hear all the other instruments, I just feel like it's so distracting from the actual tune. I just don't understand. I don't get it. I get the like kind of wanting to give a different sonic texture, but yeah, I here it just seems to distract me.
Well, unfortunately, the confusion continues with the next track on the album, Swunk.
Yeah, and so this tune, the ninth track on the album, Swunk, we're getting kind of more of the Yellow Jackets vibe from this tune, in my opinion. And the song stops and segues into what feels like a completely different tune in the middle of the track at 4:07. This transition doesn't make much sense to me at all, and it seems to lack continuity. I want us to all just take a listen. I want Max to listen to this and tell me if I'm crazy or if this just doesn't seem to work. So let's take a listen here and see what we think about this. And more of the synth sequences, and I just doesn't it feels like we're on a different song. And then at 5:20 they go back to the original feel and melody, and that just it confuses me. This like middle section doesn't seem to be in place with me. Max, what do you think about this?
I tend to agree. I think I was really grooving with what you played at the top of that
Yes,
snippet.
yeah.
And then it just sort of stopped. Like you pressed the brakes really hard at a stoplight you didn't think was going to turn red as soon as it did. That's kind of what had happened. And then you're at the red light and you're like, okay, I guess we're grooving with the red light. And then the light turns green. And then you go back to the original groove that was playing at the beginning of that snippet. Um, it's just sort of like a stoplight in the middle of nowhere. I've used that analogy before, but here it tends to make sense too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just don't it feels like there's a lack of direction, right, in this one. And some of what feels like solo sections, in my opinion, just aren't super well defined. And the last 2 minutes of the tune seem a bit jumbled to me, with the guitarist Rosenwinkel just somewhat kind of soloing over all of the what's going on until the end of the tune. And what he's playing is nice, but it just seems jumbled to me. It doesn't it this song kind of lacks clarity and continuity and direction, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. There are some nice aspects to the song though.
Yeah.
Um it's interesting here they play the whole head twice, with that head in. I mentioned that earlier in another track. That's interesting to me. You're right, it's like a different song after the 4 minute mark. I will say there's really nice guitar soloing after about the 6.5 minute mark with Kurt Rosenwinkel. And to me, that saved the song. If you just listen to that guitar stretching and he's shredding, um, you'll have a smile on your face. It's just sort of it's like jumbled, and it's like in a pile of clothes, of dirty clothes that you have not washed and you've been needing to for the last 3 or 4 days. And somewhere in there is this glorious, soulful, shredding guitar. You just have to find it. And once you do, that's when you go and you actually put your clothes in the washer and you do your laundry.
I'm wondering if my camera's pointed at my laundry basket right now. It's almost like Max is talking to me personally. We'll continue on. I think I'll get to some laundry at some point. But no, I agree. It's there's interesting aspects in the groove is really cool in certain parts, but just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then we kind of lead into another one of the interludes on the album, Blowing Changes. Max, what do you think about Blowing Changes?
I think it blows. That's what I think. It starts off with sounds of wind. That's where we get the blowing thing. It sounds like we're in the middle of a storm. We get some wind going. Before the drums enter, there's that sound of that wind, and then there's a 4-bar phrase that's soon solidified by the bass player We get a bass line that is key. It's essential here with all the other sounds going on musically. It sounds sort of random, but it's definitely organized. And Redman is on the soprano sax on this track. That livens things up, keeps things interesting. And we're going to listen to a moment here. I want you to listen for the bass line that's keeping everything together, the light drums that are being played with brushes. Then there's added effects, and listen for how Redman is treating his musical role in this instance on the soprano saxophone. Yeah, so it's nice, and I like that. That bass line really does it for me. And then that's the one consistent thing throughout. We soon get a fade out with soloing soprano. It's a short track, again, roughly 2 minutes. It blew out as soon as it blew in, just like the song says with the title, "Blowing Changes." I think there are interesting aspects to it, but I do question why.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just like, I kind of like the soundscape. I think that it's an interesting feel that we're getting here. It feels like we're just kind of blowing in the wind with Redman. It just feels like kind of another underdeveloped, not saying enough interlude. And I really wish it didn't fade out with Redman still playing. I was listening to him playing in the fade out, and he's still playing. He's still soloing. And I almost want to just keep listening to him. I could go for, you could take this somewhere. I could listen to 2 more minutes of him developing a solo and getting into a more of a groove, but that's not what we get here. We get another really short interlude that lasts about 2 minutes and just kind of disappears into the distance.
Yeah, there's like a natural aversion to improvisation at certain moments in the record that I question why, and that's one of them. If you're going to solo, of course, we have heard fade outs during solos a lot of times in jazz recording in the history of jazz music. So that in and of itself isn't completely unpredictable or unnoticed or, not familiar. It's just the way that this particularly develops, it's annoying. It becomes annoying, and you're like, well, what's going on? Why? So that's what I have to say about it.
Yeah, I agree. Where are we going with this? But that leads us into the 11th track on the album, a tune entitled Double Jeopardy. Great name for a tune. And we get a really great bass groove to start out. We get Flea on the bass using some kind of slap bass funky techniques. It's just super funky from him here. And then we get a great melody and an awesome bridge section on this track. And I want to play the melody just a little bit just so we can hear kind of the funky groove that we're getting from Flea and how great this melody is. So let's listen to the melody here on Double Jeopardy.
And I want to say it's a more memorable melody.
Yeah.
That's why it's great, because it just tends to catch in your psyche a little bit easier than some of these other heads.
Yeah, it tends to stick with you a little bit more. Let's take a listen. Yeah. Just super catchy. Simple, really.
But it'll make your head move, and that's a good thing.
That's the point. Yeah, for sure. And then, so we play through the head twice, but the bridge is a little bit different the second time through, almost like Max said, like an AAB or A and then ABC kind of thing. So the bridges definitely feels a little bit different the second time through. And then we get into a Redman solo after the second bridge. And there's just lots of space and super funky playing from Redman here. I think there's a cool use of the octave doubler throughout the solo at times. And it's not a super long or developed solo from Redman, but it's fun and funky all the way through. And it leads us into a really cool guitar solo. And we get the band kind of starting to come in with the bridge while the guitar solo continues. And I really like that arrangement here from the group. And then we get this Flea cadenza into a final kind of held out note. And I'm just wondering, the cadenza is super funky. Why is there no bass solo for Flea on this track? It seems like the perfect time for him to get in on a solo, but it's not what we get here. And I think this is an awesome tune. It's super fun, funky, and it's just got such a great melody, as we heard.
That's an excellent point. Why no bass solo for the man that's being featured on the track, which is the bass player?
Yeah, and it's Flea. I mean, everyone knows Flea.
Yeah.
So I kind of question that, but it is what it is.
Then the next track we get Put It in Your Pocket. This is a great feel, change of pace. It's an R&B sort of soul feel. It's an AABA form. It's more of a jam track. I really dig it. It's got an opening snare drum roll that did not really set up the groove that was coming per se, but it's sort of a psych out maybe. And so for that reason, it's kind of neat. It's got a catchy and cool melody, nice playing of the head too with the saxophone, and the added trumpet we get from guest artist on this record, Nicholas Payton, one of the current greats of jazz trumpet playing. It's an interesting thing during that first solo taken by Payton on trumpet. He overdubs on top of himself on one part of his solo, and then he adds a moment of trumpet background hits. Let's listen to that first moment where he adds other parts on top of his playing, and at one moment it sounds more like a trumpet section of a mini jazz band, and further on it's more of a multitude of musical treatments happening at once. Right. So I like how they're incorporating those sorts of things, and then they do that later on in the sax solo too.
Yeah, and I think it's just like Nicholas Payton's so refreshing, such a treat on this tune. His solo has great thematic development, and I actually think that this overdubbing is pretty well done here, and it's not something that I would usually enjoy. It's usually something I think gets to be cheesy at times, but I think that it's super tasteful here and does a great job of kind of tying it all in and making it super musical.
Yeah, you're right. Nicholas Payton uses repetition really well. It always feels good when he's playing, and he comes back after a sax solo, and they do some trading, and that's much needed on this album.
Yes.
Another moment of a refresher where we stretch out a little bit, and we get mano a mano, sax versus trumpet. The sax solo starts with Redman playing a lot of altissimo notes juxtaposed with moments of low notes sprinkled in as background sax parts join in with further added moments of sax lines that layer in and out of each other, just like what occurred during the trumpet solo. And then we get that trading I mentioned. It's really cool. We get both horn players that feed off of each other really well. Let's check out a part of their solo trading section. And I want you to try to notice how well both Redman and Payton are listening to one another and how they gel with the feel of the tune.
Man, that is absolutely killer.
I'm not going to say anything more on that because it says it for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, that's unlike anything we've heard thus far on the album.
Right? And we're almost done with the album. So what does
Yes.
that tell you?
Yeah, yeah.
After that, we get back into a bit of the head after that, which soon transitions into a rhythm section right out where the keyboard and the synth take over in a subtle groove focused way. Overall, really nice jam track, and it brings to the table, that sort of banana pudding that was missing from the Thanksgiving table. It's
Oh
that
yeah.
extra thing.
That's a great analogy. And something just kind of came to my mind. This album kind of feels like, at times, like it feels like we're on a highway, right? 70-mile-an-hour highway, and we're just driving down the highway, and then randomly throughout the album, we're like getting stoplights on like the 70-mile-an-hour highway, and we're slamming on the brakes. And that's what some of these weird interludes and the Lonely Woman, those are like stoplights on this highway. And it feels like these past two tunes, we're just free moving on the highway, and it's so nice. I don't know. It feels like why do we have these random stoplights, like Max said, that are just interrupting what's such a nice joyride through the the state. I don't understand that.
And the title of the album is Momentum.
Exactly.
So we're getting in the way of momentum. But maybe that's on purpose.
Maybe
I don't
that's
know.
the point. Is I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, maybe the manipulation of the momentum is what he's talking about. But for me, I want full speed ahead. That's the momentum I want.
You want to go 90.
That's what we're getting here on this track. We're going 90 in the 70. And we love it.
Right, with the top down. Your windows are
Absolutely. Yeah.
down.
Hopefully, some doesn't rock fly into your eye going 90 miles an hour.
That'll stop you.
But yeah, what a killer tune! Yeah, I love the tune. It is 90 and a 70, and Nicholas Payton is a super super awesome treat on this one. And it leads us into the final tune on the album, which is entitled Showtime. And it's interesting. This one, Joshua Redman says something almost like saying the sound check is over when the sound starts. And to me, it's like, wait, was the entire album the sound check? We start with the tune entitled The Sound Check, and now this one is entitled Showtime. And is it like we're actually starting the gig? Was the entire thing just a sound check, or what's, it kind of messed with my mind a little bit. I was like, what is going on here? How do you feel about it, Max?
I think it's more like a sandwich where you got sound check at the top and then the gig at the bottom, and then everything in the middle is just the album.
Okay.
And this is, like it's like Showtime is the antithesis of sound check. Maybe it would make more sense if you had sound check first, Showtime as the second tune.
I don't get it. Yeah.
And then you get into the album. I don't know.
Yeah. It leads me to think like, oh, what was all this stuff in between? If now we're getting to Showtime, what was all that we heard between sound check and Showtime?
Well, and that maybe also messes with momentum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that may be what they're going for with the title of the album.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's a cool tune. It's a fun, funky, groovy tune. Yeah, but that wraps up the album, the final track, 13-tune album. Max, let's get into our top threes and our not so hot tracks on this one. I think I'll go first on this one, and I'll let you go second. So for my top three, my number one is the track that we just kind of really got into, was Put It in Your Pocket by with Nicholas Payton on it. Just everything about it's great. The soloing, the trading section, that's just killer. Such a good groove. I love that one. And then my number two track is going to be the track right before it, Double Jeopardy. I just think such a great groove, such a great melody. It's fun to listen to. Redman doesn't take himself too seriously, just super fun, funky playing by Redman, and a great guitar solo as well. So I love Double Jeopardy. And then I kind of was in between a few things for my third top three, and I'll be honest, like River Wide was definitely sneaking in there. Sweet Nasty was trying to get in there a little bit too, and I think there was one more tune. I really like the Crunch, but just not long. Oh, Shut Your Mouth. But the one I had to go with was Greasy G. It's just kind of more of the same. It's fun. It's funky. It's fun to listen to. That's what I get from this album. I get a bunch of fun tracks to listen to, and so Greasy G is my number three. Just super fun, funky tune. And my not so hot is going to be Swunk. I couldn't get over that middle section where they just put a different song in the middle of a song. It doesn't, sometimes you can do that and it's cool and you can interlude interestingly between the two tunes. They don't do that. They just end. It basically sounds, you would think that you switch to a new track, play something, and then we go back to the original song. It doesn't make sense to me. And so for that reason, it's my not so hot. And it's not individually, all the sections of the song aren't bad, but collectively it just doesn't make sense to me. So not so hot.
Yeah, those are some great points. My number one is Sweet Nasty, which was the second tune on the album. I love the different sections. Joshua Redman gets to stretch a little bit. Great solos. Second favorite on the album is Greasy G. They're just greasier, dirtier. I love that style that we get from classic Redman. And my third favorite is Put It in Your Pocket, which featured Nicholas Payton. That's the one we talked about 2 tunes ago, where they do some trading. It really opens up the album in a way that some of the tracks are missing, that don't bring to the table. And so that sort of completes the musical table setting that we're getting with this album, with what Put It in Your Pocket gives us. My not so hot is Lonely Woman. I cannot get over the spaceship alien sounds, those synth sounds that get in the way of everything else musically. And it's sort of conjumbled and it's cacophonic, or it's, how do you say that? It's cacophony. There's just too much going on, I think, with Lonely Woman. And that's why it's not so hot. Not to say that there are not nice parts of that tune, great soloing, like you said. If you just take out that sort of alien thing, it speaks for itself.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's so busy. Lonely Woman was trying to sneak into my not so hot, but I had to go a different direction with how much Swunk bothered me. But I definitely understand why Lonely Woman would do it for you. Max, why don't we get into our overall album thoughts and our ratings for this one now that we've kind of listened to everything and talked about all the tunes?
Okay. I think Joshua Redman's Momentum seems like a glimpse into a moment of artistic redirection that was never completely fulfilled. Redman's overall message seems clear, with his group being named Elastic Band, hinting at a new approach or style focus with this feat. Clearly, the incredible saxophonist is engaging with funk, fusion, soul jazz, and moments of electronic music, but there's so many directions at once, it's hard to pin down what to focus on, effectively cluttering the product. A great cast of musicians is utilized really well, putting to work Sam Yael, the co-producer on the album, and the main keyboardist. Paired with them are a tag team of Jeff Ballard and Brian Blade on drums, with a moment of Questlove on drums too, plus a number of special guests, including guitarist Kurt Rosenwinkel on Swunk, trumpeter Nicholas Payton on Put It in Your Pocket, vibraphonist Stefan Harris, and guitarists Peter Bernstein, Eric Krasno, and Jeff Parker. Bassist Flea on a number of tunes too, and funky bassist Michelle Indagiacello on Greasy G, one of the better tracks. A number of the tunes here are originals from Redman and Yael, yet we also get a convoluted version of Ornette Coleman's Lonely Woman, a nice and interesting rendition of Sheryl Crow's River Wide, and a short-lived exploration of Led Zeppelin's The Crunch. This version of Lonely Woman would have been great if it didn't sound like it took place on a spaceship. A lengthier take on The Crunch, with Redman really blowing on top, would have been appreciated too. Tunes like Sweet Nasty, Shut Your Mouth, Greasy G, Swunk, and Double Jeopardy are really the meat and potatoes of the album, displaying a reverence or influence from cats like Eddie Harris, Bob James, Yellow Jackets, and more of that ilk. Those songs, along with Put It in Your Pocket, are the heartbeat and pulse of this recording, yet its momentum, pun intended, is caught off guard by stints of maddening confusion, by short interludes such as Just a Moment and Blowing Changes. The opening snippet of Soundcheck and the short closer named Showtime work really well to bookmark the beginning and ending of this endeavor, sandwiched in between sounds that would occur when you're on a performance soundcheck, juxtaposed with noises and grooves that happen when you're about to start the gig. All in all, this is a deeply appreciated effort from Joshua Redman. He is such a great player and remains to be a staple in the world of jazz with his relatively recent move to record with Blue Note Records. When I listen to Momentum, there are moments where I seem lost. Yet, when there's a heavy bass groove established, or when Redman is able to really solo and take a significant ride on one of these tunes, I'm right at home. A few of these compositions may also have one too many melodic sections to them to really be fully remembered or captured in the brain of a listener. While there is focus and a clear message to the music, it's extremely muddled and misty at moments. Momentum gets in its own way more than a time or two, causing the ears to trip. When you boil it all down, this is good music. It may just fall flat of fulfilling what was originally intended. My overall score is a 6.8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think you make some really great points and just summarize kind of the overall, album's great points and bad points. So yeah, those are great points. I think that Momentum from Joshua Redman's Elastic Band is a recording with intentions of taking a listener through a journey of funk-filled soundscapes through a variety of compositions. Redman and company are not afraid to stretch their imaginations and experiment with different textures and techniques, as is made obvious by their interpretation of the free jazz composition Lonely Woman. There's a bit of a revolving cast on the album, which both leads to some fun and different perspectives, but may also cause slight disjointness in the overall sound. Redman's playing throughout is soulful, grooving, and fun to listen to. And I think many of the funk-focused tunes on the album, such as Greasy G, Double Jeopardy, and Sweet Nasty, really shine through and are overly enjoyable listens. They are fun and musical and do a great job of keeping the listener engaged. The covers of Sheryl Crow's River Wide and Led Zeppelin's The Crunch are also great additions to the album. I was tempted to put River Wide into my top 3 because of how different and soulful the track really is. And there are just a few spots on the album where it becomes overdone and lacks continuity. The random bouts of alien abducting sequencers throughout the album, and especially on Coleman's Lonely Woman, does nothing to add any substantive musical value to the recording. A few of the interludes, such as Blowing Changes and Just a Moment, just do not add as much to the overall album as I feel were originally intended. I do not think that Momentum has revolutionized the way that we view jazz fusion as much as it might have been intended from Redman and Yael. Momentum is in total a super funky and fun project to listen to with outstanding musical contributions from a wide range of talents. There are times on the album where I find myself enthralled by soul-fulfilling funk grooves and Redman's front and center sound, and other times checking around the corner of my apartment to make sure the aliens are just in my headphones and not out to get me. Take the good for what it is, which is great at times, and try not to be too bothered by some of the weirdness. Momentum is a unique effort from Redman that is more than worth a listen, and handpicking a good number of tracks from the album to add to one of your favorite playlists and leaving the others just right where they're at. So I gave this one a 7.4 out of 10. Which brings our Jazz Jam score on this one to 7.1 out of 10 on Joshua Redman's Momentum.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say. And yeah, it's fun. Definitely check it out. Get an idea for yourself, because some of it, you might like some of the kind of weird stuff that Max and I weren't really digging. So check it out, get an opinion for yourself. And
yeah, I could see some people really liking this album.
Yeah. And I wouldn't
and there are
blame
moments, right. There's validity to that for sure. And there are moments I really dig this album.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that momentum of the really, interesting moments to me are just stopped like an emergency brake. And that was annoying to me. And that's why I gave it a little lower score than you, because that really got to me.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. And yeah, it's great music. It's just a little bit different, and you can see what Joshua Redman was going for. Well, we're going to get into next week's album, which I think some listeners are going to be really excited about. Before we do, I want to go through a couple of housekeeping things. Just make sure to follow us on all of our social media. We have an Instagram. We have a website that's really fantastic. It's got all of our album reviews where you can go and look and see what we said about things. We've got a power rankings list of every episode we've ever done, so you can see kind of where this album ranks up to other albums that we've listened to and reviewed on the podcast. That's a really cool feature. We have a Spotify playlist of our top threes from every album. You can find all of that on our website, so that's definitely a great resource. We've started to do a little bit more in the YouTube space. We did a reaction to Leve's NPR Tiny Desk, so definitely go and check that out. We're just the Jazz Jam Podcast on YouTube, and we're thinking about doing Joshua Redman's NPR Tiny Desk. That might be upcoming since he just put one out, do a reaction to that. So yeah, go check us out on YouTube and just like and subscribe, rate us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. And we love to hear from you. So feel free to email us, reach out to us on Instagram. We'd love to hear from y'all and do some recommendations. I think we've got a listener recommendation. This was one from a drummer, a friend that I know, and we've got another one coming up in a couple weeks. So definitely reach out. Don't be shy. Tell us what you want to hear. And just thanks for listening. Next week's album, Max, what are we doing next week? I'll let you tell us since you're the saxophone guy in the podcast.
We are doing one of the quintessential saxophone albums from one of the ultimate players that you and I have not really gotten into yet. The fabulous, the spiritual, the important John Coltrane. We're going to get into his album from 1957 or 1958 called Blue Train. This was his only Blue Note recording. A lot of interesting things about this album in terms of the personnel, the logistics, the record label. We get Curtis Fuller on trombone, the great Lee Morgan on trumpet, all-star rhythm section with Philly Joe Jones, Paul Chambers, Kenny Drew on piano. It's just one of the all-time great albums that eventually was going to come up as we continue to do this. And I think it's time we get into it. We discuss some Train and some interesting Train that I think that album Blue Train really solidified his place in jazz history. And that was sort of the record in my mind where we go, OSHIT, that's John Coltrane.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into more Train. There's a number of just landscape changing albums that he'll put out, and I think this is just a great place to start. I love that you picked Blue Train. Very digestible as far as Train goes, and just such a good crew, with all the musicians on it. So a great place to start for Train, and we've finally gotten around to doing it. Sorry, we're gonna get around to everything. It's just we try to cover all the bases, and we'll get to everything eventually. So we're on Train now, and it's gonna be a great episode. So I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, me too. I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say about it. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, I'm excited to give it an in-depth listen because, these albums, we listen to a bunch of this, but the way that we get to listen to them doing the podcast, we're really just trying to dig in. I'll listen to the same song 5 times in a row and try to listen for different things. So we're really digging in to try to – so I'm excited to really, really get into Blue Train and get into all the nooks and crannies of the album. That'll be super fun.
There's a lot there. There may be too much, but we'll do it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, we'll get it covered. But yeah, thank everyone so much for listening. This has been a really fun episode, a different, unique album than anything we've done. So just want to thank you all for listening. This has been an episode of the Jazz Jam Podcast, and we'll catch you next time.